B'siyata d'shmai, we're going to learn sukkah Daf Lamed. We're going to start on Daf Chavtes Amud Beis, in the middle of the Amud, a new Mishnah, a new Perek. Says the Mishnah, and the first two prokim in the Masechet sukkah we were discussing, the halachas of sukkah, yeshiva sukkah, etc. And now we're moving to the next mitzvah of the Yom Tov of Sukkos, which is known as the Arba Minim, the four species that we take, the lulav, the estrig, the hadassim, and the aravas, and the many halachas that apply to them. Says the Mishnah, we're going to start with lulav. Lulav hagozul, if somebody has a lulav which is stolen, he's trying to do the mitzvah of using a stolen lulav on Sukkos, va'yovish, or if it's a dried lulav, posel, then the lulav is posel. And Rashi explains here the reason that a stolen lulav is posel is because it says in the pasuk, "V'lokachtem lochem b'yom harishon," that it has to belong to you. And we'll see in the Gemara that even on the second day and on from Yom Tov, that the mitzvah of taking lulav is only a rabbinical one, and we wouldn't have the pasuk of lochem. However, there's other reasons that would invalidate using such a lulav, even for the rest of Yom Tov, based on a rule of mitzvah baba avera, that doing a mitzvah that involved, or that could only have been done in this case by transgressing an avera, is an invalid mitzvah. A dry lulav, says Rashi, because a mitzvah needs to be beautiful. We learn it out from Zeh Keli Va'anvehu, and to have a dried lulav is not beautiful. Says Rashi, says the Mishnah further, Shel Asherah v'Shel Ir Hanidachas, using a lulav that was Avodah Zarah, that they used it to serve Avodah Zarah, or an Ir Hanidachas, which is a city that was seduced into idol worship, and everything in that city one's not allowed to have any benefit from that city. One has to burn everything in that city, so this lulav has to be burnt. Anything that's burnt is perceived and halachically perceived as if it's already burnt. If it's burnt, it's just like ashes, and ashes does not have any size. And we know that lulav has a minimum size, and anything that one has to burn, in itself, has no size. That's what Rashi says here in the Mishnah, and therefore posel, such a lulav is posel. Continues the Mishnah, niktam roishoi, if the head of the lulav is cut off, then, and Rashi says here, it's not beautiful, it's not nice to use such a lulav for a mitzvah, or nifritzu alav, or if the leaves of the lulav have been torn off the spine of the lulav, and now they're only connected to the lulav because you've tied them, you've done an external act of tying them together, then again, this is not a nice lulav. Then posel, and such a lulav is posel. Nifredu alav, if the leaves are indeed still attached to the spine, however the tops of the leaves have very much spread out to the sides, and it looks now like branches of a tree, kosher, the Tanakhama say it's still a kosher lulav. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ya'agdenu melamalo," you should tie the tops of the leaves, the parts of the leaves that have separated themselves from the spine. They haven't been detached from the spine; they've just opened up. Tie them back together. Together, they should be lying on the spine, like other lulavim that have not yet opened, and then it's kosher. Continues the Gemara, the Mishnah, Tzine Hara Barzel, those lulavim that grow, those date palms, from which lulavim are taken of the Hara Barzel, and we're going to learn about that ksheira is their kosher, even though their leaves are relatively short, and it's not like a typical lulav where the leaves start at the bottom and they're relatively long, and each leaf starts within the area of the lower leaf, and they're well covered, they cover each other, they cover the spine of the lulav well. That would be a regular lulav. Tzine Hara Barzel, the leaves are very, very short, and nonetheless, ksheira is those lulavim are kosher, and we'll see in the Gemara under which conditions. The final statement in the Mishnah, lulav sheyesh bo shloisha tfachim, a lulav that is 3 tfachim long, kedei le'na'anea bo, and in order to be able to do na'anua, which is to move or to shake the lulav in the 6 directions that one needs to shake it to perform the mitzvah in the most proper way, then a lulav has to have 3 tfachim in order to be able to shake it. Lenanea boy kosher, then it's kosher. And we're going to discuss in the Gemara, does this mean 3 tefachim plus a tefach to be menanea? We'll see that in the Gemara. And the Gemara is actually going to say that everybody agrees that the lulav has to be at least 4 tefachim long, because you need the 3 tefachim, which is the same minimum length for the hadassim and the aravos as well. Just you need another tefach, lenanea, and there's going to be a discussion, do you need a 4th tefach of spine, or is it sufficient if the 4th tefach are the leaves that even protrude beyond the spine? Because the uppermost leaves that protrude, that come out, that are attached to the highest most point on the spine of the lulav, they continue going up beyond the spine. Can those leaves be included in this tefach or not? Is something we're going to see in the Gemara. But if it has 3 tefachim plus a tefach for shaking, kosher, that's the minimum size of a lulav, and then it's kosher. Says the Gemara, Kaposik Vitoni, the Mishnah that says that a lulav that was dry and stolen, the first statement in the Mishnah, lulav agozel vayovish posel. It's just a very, no strings attached. It's posel. Kaposik v'toni, lo yishna b'yom tov rishon, v'lo yishna b'yom tov sheni. The Gemara, the Mishnah doesn't say to us that it's only posel. On the first day, as we said before, the mitzvah of taking the lulav, the arba minim, the lulav, let's call it the lulav, on the first day of Yom Tov is a mitzvah and a chiyuv min ha-Torah, a biblical requirement, but the other days it's only a rabbinical one. The Mishnah makes no difference here. The Mishnah doesn't tell us only the first day. It says lulav agozel vayovish is posel, seems to be right through Yom Tov. The Gemara is asking, Bishlei Yavesh, the issue of a dry lulav. Now I can understand, Hadar Be'inon, Veleka, it needs to be a nice lulav. It doesn't matter whether it's the first day, which is Minatera, it doesn't matter if it's the other days, because the Chiyuv Midrabanon is a Zeicher LeMikdash. It's there to remind us of the mitzvah that was done Minatera in the Beis HaMikdash, because in the Beis HaMikdash, taking the lulav all 7 days was a biblical mitzvah. It was the chiyuv for 7 days. It's only outside the Beis HaMikdash that it's only a chiyuv Minatera 1 day. And the rest of the sukkahs that we take the Arba Minim, it's Zeicher LeMikdash. It's got to be done similar to the way it was done in the Beis HaMikdash, and there needs to be a hidur mitzvah. Zeh keli v'anveyu, do mitzvahs beautifully. So I can understand that veleka, since it's not beautiful to use a dry lulav over the whole Yom Tov, it's possible the whole of Yom Tov, even the 2nd day and on. Ela gozel, however, regarding a stolen lulav, to Bishlei Yom Tov Rishon, the first day of Sukkot, I can understand why you should have an issue with that. Tichsiv lochem, it says in the pasuk, Ulekachtem lochem bayom rishon, creates hodor, etc. That you should take the arba minim on the first day. It should be lochem. It should be mishelochem. It should belong to you. It should be yours. We saw this already on Daf Zayin Amud Beis. Ela b'Yom Tov Sheni, but the 2nd day of Yom Tov and till the end of Yom Tov, Amai Loi. Why are you not yotza with a lulav that was stolen? You're not allowed to steal. But if you have a stolen lulav, why would that stop you using it to do the mitzvah of Arba Minim? Lochem is only on the first day. V'lokachtem lochem bayom rishon. That on the first day, it has to belong to you. And the rest of Yom Tov, it's not a chiyuv min ha-Torah to take a lulav outside the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Gemara, Omer Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai mishum dahavale mitzvah haba ba'avera. A new concept that there's something called a mitzvah, that you could only do this mitzvah via the fact that you did an avera. A mitzvah haba ba'avera is possible. It's an invalid mitzvah. Where do we know this concept from, that a mitzvah haba ba'avera is possible? Shenemar, we learn it from a pasuk by Korbonos. It says in the pasuk, "V'amartem hine matlo v'ipachtem oisoi Omer Hashem tzvokos v'heveisem gozul." You're going to bring, if you bring a korban, an animal which is stolen, v'es hapiseach, or a lame animal, v'es hachoyle, or a sick animal, v'veisem es hamincha. Ha'ertze oisom yetchem Omer Hashem. Says Malachi, will I be appeased? Will I want you to bring korbanos that are stolen or lame or sick? And so what do we see from here? The pasuk compares and writes gozel, stolen, together with lame. Gozel, dumya de piseach. There's obviously some similarity between them. Ma piseach, in the same way as a lame animal, lesle takanta, it's permanently going to be invalid for a korban because it has a fixed and permanent blemish. Afgozel, so too a stolen korban, a stolen animal, lesle takanta. Even after a while, even after the owners are miyayish. We know there's a concept which we'll learn about much more in later on in Shas and Baba Kama, but there's a concept where a person, it gives up. He almost verbalizes and says, Vaili lechisaron kis, I'm giving up ever receiving this item back. It's lost, it's stolen, it's gone. It's good, it's as good as gone. So even after a while, even after you've heard the person who this item was stolen from, this animal was stolen from, even if you hear him saying, that's it, this is never, I'm never going to see this again, and at that point it's as if he's given up ownership on it. It's a concept called Yush. Then even though regarding other halachas after Yush, it's possible for the person to actually acquire it as if it's now being acquired from an ownerless, from Hefka. However, regarding the Mizbeach, no. You cannot bring a korban which was stolen. That's what we learn from this pasuk. Lo yishnot lifnei yush, irrespective of whether it's before the owner was miyayish, had given up ever getting it back. Lo yishnot la'achar yush, irrespective of whether he's already been miyayish. That's what it means, even la'achar zman, even forever. It's not a kosher korban. And the Gemara is going to explain. Bishlei milifnei yush, before the person is miyayish, that means this animal still belongs to him, to the person it was stolen from. And now the thief, the person who stole it, is not more than got somebody else's animal in his hands. Then we can understand that the korban should be possible. It says, Odom ki yakriv mikem Omar Achmon. It says in the parasha of the korbanis, bring a korban from mikem, from yours. This is not yours, it's his. V'lavdi dehu, it's not yours. Elo la'acha yush. But even after he's already given up hope of ever getting this back, and we said before that gozul, lesle takanta, there's no, even in the long-term future, you can never use it as a korban, which means even after he's been nisyayish. Why? How can you be yush? As soon as the original owner gives up hope of ever getting it back, then the person who stole it has been koinit, he's acquired it. It's as if this animal no longer has an owner. So he becomes the owner. Why can he not use it for a korban? Elolav, it must be mishum dahavale mitzvah b'avera, because it's all fine and good that you've acquired it and you have ownership on it, but you only have ownership on it because you did an avera. You stole it. And since it's a stolen animal, then you permanently are not allowed to use it for a mitzvah, even though it's now yours. Even though as far as mikem is concerned, Odom ki yakriv mikem, as far as the financial point of view, it's yours. And nonetheless, since it was acquired via an avera, it's a mitzvah b'av avera, you cannot use it. And the same way as a korban, a mitzvah b'av avera is an invalid korban, so too a lulav hagozel, a mitzvah b'av avera, is possible all 7 days. Continues the Gemara of Omer Rabbi Yechanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Ma'idich Siv. It says the pasuk in Yeshaya, Ki ani Hashem oyehev mishpat. I love justice, soine gozel ba'oila, and I hate when people steal ba'oila to bring a korban oila. Moshel, this is analogous lemelech bos of Adam, to a regular king, a mortal king. Shaya oiver al beis hameches. He was passing by the toll booth. Omar Lavodov, he said to his slaves, Tenu meches l'moichsim, and give the taxes to the tax collectors. Omru loi, so his servants said to the king, Vale kol meches kulei shelchahu, where are these taxes all going? They're all coming to your coffers, it's all yours. What, you're going to pay taxes? Omar lehem, he said to them, Mimeni yilmudu, I want everybody to learn from me. Kol oivrei drachim, all the people that are going along the roads here. V'lo yavrichu atzmam min hameches, they will not avoid and escape paying the taxes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, Hashem says, Omar Hashem, Ani soine gozel gezel ba'oila. I hate it when korbanos are brought with stolen money. Mimeni yilmadu, from the fact that I hate it, even though it's my money, everything's coming back to me, everything was always mine, everything is always mine, and nonetheless, I've verbally stated, says Hashem, via the Novi in Yeshaya, that I hate theft. Soine gezel ba'oila, mimeni yilmudu bonai, my sons, my Klal Yisrael will learn from me. V'yavrichu atzmon, they will run away min hagezel, from stealing. And this is a source that mitzvah haba ba'avera is invalid. Continues the Gemara. Itmar nami. We also learned, again, as we saw before, Rabbi Yochanan said that even on the second day and on, a lulav hagozul is possible because of mitzvah habab avera. Omer Rav Ami also said that yavish possible, the reason that a dry lulav is possible, mishum she'enei hodor, it's not beautiful. Gozul nami, regarding a stolen lulav, gozul possible, a stolen lulav is possible, mishum dahavale mitzvah habab avera, as Rabbi Yochanan said before, that mitzvah habab avera is a reason to make this lulav possible. Rav Ami says the same. Continues the Gemara. Upliga de Rabbi Yitzchok. It seems that Rabbi Yitzchok is arguing with Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Ami. Domer Rabbi Yitzchok bar Nachmeni Omar Shmuel. It was said in the name of Shmuel. Lo yishanu ela b'yom tov rishon. When do we say that gozul is possible? Only on the first day of Yom Tov, because on the first day of Yom Tov it says, "Ulekachtem lochem b'yom rishon." On the first day, you have a biblical requirement to take a lulav and make sure it's yours. Aval b'yom tov sheni, but on the second day of Yom Tov, where it's only a rabbinical requirement to take the lulav, mitoich sheyotze b'shol, in the same way as you can be yotze on the second day with a borrowed lulav, because, and everybody who agrees with that, a borrowed lulav on the second day, it doesn't say lochem, it's not a mitzvah habab avera. Everybody agrees you can use a borrowed lulav on the second day, yotze nami begozul. You can also be yotze the mitzvah of lulav with a stolen lulav from the second day of Yom Tov and on. Mosev of Nachman bar Yitzchok. Of Nachman bar Yitzchok is now asking a question against what we just saw in the name of Shmuel. Rabbi Yitzchok told us in the name of Shmuel that the second day of Yom Tov, Shaul, a borrowed lulav is mutter, and so too a stolen lulav one can be to the mitzvah. And we're going to ask a question from this from our Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah, lulav hagozul vayovish posel, that a dry or stolen lulav is possible to be used on Yom Tov. And let's try and understand, when is the Mishnah talking about? So before we're understanding when the Mishnah is talking about, from the fact the Mishnah only says that gozul is possible and doesn't say that shaul, even a borrowed lulav, is possible, we can deduce from the Mishnah that gozul is possible, ha shaul, but a borrowed lulav is kosher. And now let's understand, when are we talking about? Amos, when is this? Is it talking about the first day of Yom Tov? Hoksiv lochem. It says in the pasuk, "V'lekachtem lochem b'yom rishon." Mishelochem, it has to be yours. The same pasuk that says you cannot use a stolen lulav on the first day also says you cannot use a borrowed lulav on the first day. V'hai lavdi dehu, a borrowed lulav, it's not yours. It's not lochem. You can't be out to the mitzvah on the first day of Yom Tov with that. Elo lav, it must be b'yom tov sheni. The our Mishnah is talking about the second day of Yom Tov and on. Uktoni gozul pasel, and it says in the Mishnah, gozul is pasel. So what do we see from here? That mitzvah habab avera pasels the lulav. So how can you, Shmuel, say that in the same way as shaul is mutter, so too gozul is mutter? Gozul is not mutter. The Mishnah says explicitly gozul is pasel. Answers the Gemara, Rava Omar la'olam b'yom tov rishon. It could well be that the Mishnah is actually talking about the first day of Yom Tov. V'loi miboya kama. Don't deduce from the Mishnah that only lulav, which is gozul, is possible, but a borrowed lulav is kosher, and then you're saying it must be that it's not talking about the first day. No, it's talking about the first day. And there's actually more reason to allow a person to use a stolen lulav than to use a borrowed lulav. And therefore the Mishnah is impressing on us that even a stolen lulav is possible, it's not called lochem. That means there's reason to believe that a stolen lulav could be lochem. A borrowed lulav is definitely not lochem. A stolen lulav maybe is lochem. How? Loimi boy a shol. That we can take for granted that a borrowed lulav, the lav didehu, doesn't belong to him, you cannot use it on the first day. Avil gozul, but a stolen lulav ema, maybe we can assume stam gezela yush bailimhu, that stam gazela, which means that if somebody steals something from somebody else, even though we did not hear that the original owners had given up ever getting it back, which is a concept called yush, even though we didn't hear him being miyayish, we can assume that he's nisyayish, because he saw us stealing it and he's got no strength to fight this person off. The lulav is gone, it's been stolen. So you can see that the owner saw the lulav being stolen. He saw that he can't fight off the robber, the thief, so he's definitely going to give up. And therefore, if he gives up, then the thief himself is kaina. putting aside mitzvah bob avera that Shmuel doesn't hold as an issue here. And so it's called lochem. That I may have thought it's kosher, ukudidei dami, and it's considered as if it belongs to the person that stole it. Kumash malon, the Mishnah is coming to tell us that no, that until you actually heard him expressing explicitly, I've given up ever getting this lulav, then it's yush. Once it had been a yush, then it belongs to him. And then besides for the issue of mitzvah bab avera, there's no issues of lochem. But all the while he hasn't verbally expressed his giving up hope of getting it back, we do not assume he's given up. Why not? You can see it's been stolen. You can see that you can't fight him off. Why is that not as good as saying, I give up? And Rashi explains, because this person is thinking to himself, don't worry, today he's stronger than me, but tomorrow I'll catch him on the corner, I'll take him to Beis Din, I'll already get my lulav back. So this person is not really giving up hope, unless you hear him explicitly giving up hope. And if he's not giving up hope, then he hasn't given up ownership. It's still his. If it's still his, there's a lack of lochem, and that's why it's possible. So that's what the Mishnah is coming to impress on us. And according to Shmuel, it must be the Mishnah is talking about on the first day, because Shmuel doesn't hold of the issue of mitzvah bab avera. He says explicitly that on the second day and on, where there's no issue of lochem, in the same way as you can use a borrowed lulav, everyone agrees with that, you can also use a stolen lulav. That is what that's how we have to read the Mishnah according to Shmuel. Omalu Rav Huna. Continues the Gemara. Rav Huna said lahani avankri, to these merchants, and he said to them as follows: Ki zavnitu asa me'akum, when you're going to buy hadassim from goyim, lo sigzezu atem, you don't be the ones to cut the hadassim off the hadassim tree. Elo ligzezuhu inu, let the sellers, the goyim who are selling you the hadassim, they should cut the hadassim off the tree. V'yavuluchu, and then they should sell it to you. My tama, why would this be necessary? Says the Gemara, because stam oivdei kechovim gazlena arasaninu, because we can take it for granted, and there is such a stoma that a goy who's got land, and this goy has land, he's got his hadassim trees there, this land is actually been stolen from a yid. It belongs to Yisrael. V'karka einon igzeles. Rav Huna is now assuming that land, property in and of its own, is not something you can actually steal. It's not like movable objects that you can take it away. No, it's karka, it's land, and you cannot steal it. Which means even if you throw the owners out of the property and you take over the property, it hasn't become yours. You haven't acquired it. The land still belongs to the original owners, even if the owner gives up. It doesn't matter. It's as if the land is actually still belonging to the original owners. And it's only when you cut something off the land, in this case the hadassim, or it could be a number of other cases, when you turn something on that property from being attached to the ground to being detached from the ground, the moment you detach it from the ground, at that point you're actually doing the geneva. That is when you're stealing. And since the owners have already been nisyayish, that may be true, they've been nisyayish. Just if karka einon igzeles, then halachically speaking, the land itself is not, you cannot steal land, so yush is a non-factor. And Rav Huna was telling them that the fact that it's being cut off, now the gezela is happening. Don't make sure that you are not those who are doing gezela, because if you do the gezela, this will not be kosher hadassim for you. And there's a number of ways of understanding that. Either Rav Huna holds yush kadi loikoni, which means that if the only thing that's happened is that the original owners have given up ever getting this stolen item back, it's not good enough that you could say that you are koina it, and you can only be koina, you can only acquire this stolen object providing there's been yush, only if there's also been shinui rishus, for example, if it's changed hands yet again, or even if you do hold yush as koina, that you can acquire it after yush, but nonetheless there is an element of mitzvah bob avera, that you have this hadassim in your hand because of an avera that was done. When you cut those hadassim, that's when you actually did an act of stealing, and it's a mitzvah bob avera and you're not yotza. And therefore, Rav Huna told them, you don't cut the hadassim. Who's going to cut them? Hilkach l'gzazur inhu. The goyim, they should cut them. Keheicha de lehava yiush bailim biyodayu didhu. In order that in their hands they would have stolen it, and the yiush which was the owners gave up a long time ago, when will that happen? When will that make a difference? Now, when they cut it, when it's in the hands of the goyim still, it's not in your hands. And then when they're going to sell it to you, now you have an added advantage of shinui reshus. It's now after yush, the goy has stolen it by cutting it. Now there's also a shinui reshus. He's selling it to you. He's changing hands, biyodaichu in your hands, and then yush and shinui reshus. You're definitely kaina. You are not the ones that did the stealing. There's no issue of mitzvah bar ba'avera, and therefore, and then you will be able to use these hadassim for sukkahs. Asks the Gemara, soif ki gozazu avankri. Even if these merchants themselves would do the act of cutting the hadassim, then the yiush will happen in their domain. And when they sell it, because these are just merchants, they're not using these hadassim themselves, they're going to sell it to somebody else, so the people are going to buy it. And the buyers, it's already a change of hands. So what will be the issue? These buyers are not the ones that cut it, and these buyers are not the ones in whose reshus the yiush happened. They didn't steal it. And so what's the issue? Says the Gemara, Rav Huna was trying to say that you're right, if you're going to sell these hadassim to other people, then it will be okay. The problem is that if the merchants themselves want to use these hadassim, if they are the ones who are cutting the hadassim down, then there'll be an issue that you haven't got shinui reshus. You did the stealing. If you did the stealing, then there's no shinui reshus after this. Yush is not kaina. And if there is kaina, then you've got a mitzvah b'avera. You won't be able to use it. So for you merchants yourselves to be able to use these hadassim, it must be that somebody else stole it, that somebody else cut it down and then sold it to you. Make sure the goyim do the cutting of the hadassim. Asks the Gemara, v'liknuya b'shinui maisa. So it's true, shinui reshus, a change of hands, won't help in the event that the merchants themselves, if they cut it down and they want to use these hadassim for their own arba minim, will have an issue. But there's another way that you can be kaina without shinui bailim, without shinui reshus, without changing of hands, and that's if you change the object that you actually stolen. So then you've got yiush and shinui maisa, you've done an act to change it, then you're kaina. So the Gemara is saying, why did Rav Huna tell the merchants, get somebody else to cut it? And then there's a shinui reshus, you cut it yourself, and there's a shinui maisa. What's the shinui maisa? Because we know that in order to be able to use the hadassim, you actually have to tie it into a bundle together with the lulav and the aravas. So the very fact that you're taking these stolen hadassim and tying them, you're doing an act to them. It's now not the same hadassim as the original hadassim, and therefore it will be kasha, yush and shinui maisa. Answers the Gemara, Kosova lulav ain't tzarich eged. Obviously Rav Huna holds that it's not a mandatory, it's not essential that you actually tie the three species together, the lulav, hadassim and aravas. Since you don't have to tie them, even if you do tie them, it's not considered a significant activity, a significant act, and it's not considered a shinui maisa. Even if you're going to suggest that Rav Huna says lulav tzarich eged, that you do need to tie the lulav with the hadassim together, it's not considered a significant act that together with the yiush you'll be kaina, because shinui achayze lebriyasehu. It's a type of an activity, it's a type of a change that is not long lasting. It's so easy to undo. You can just, in the same way as you tied it, you can just untie it, and the hadassim are exactly the way they were at the beginning. You haven't changed the hadassim by doing something to them. Since you haven't changed them, then it doesn't help that you've done something to them, and you only have yiush without the shinui reshus. And the Rav Huna says if you have yiush without shinui reshus, there'll be an issue either because yiush is not kaina or mitzvah b'avera. Asks the Gemara, and the Gemara says, "Shinui, that a type of a change which can be easily undone is not considered a shinui." Asks the Gemara, so we've discussed shinui reshus, change of hands. We've discussed shinui maisa, changing the object. But there's a third concept, Shinui Hashem, when it changes its name. If after you've stolen something and after Yush, it changes its name, again you've acquired it. It's yours. Demikora Havale Asa. Over here, there's a Shinui Hashem, it changes its name. Because beforehand, before you tied it into the bundle, it's called Asa, it's called a Hadas, it's called just a simple Hadas leaf, branch. Vahashta, but now that you've tied it into the lulav, Hoishana, it's not called Hadas, it's called Hoishana. And it's the reason it's called Hoishana is because we use it on lulav. When we say Hoishana, then we are holding the lulav. So it's a Shinui Hashem. Yush and Shinui Hashem is Kaina. Says the Gemara, no. Mikara nami le'asa Hoishana korule. Even before you tie the lulav, before you tie the hadas into the lulav, even before you cut it down, this hadas was always called a hadas of Hoshana, a lulav appropriate hadas. And therefore it didn't change its name when you tied it. It always was associated to the lulav, it didn't change its name, and therefore you don't have Yush and Shinui Hashem. If you don't have Yush and Shinui Hashem, you're not Kaina. And therefore we've now understood why Rav Huna told the merchants, make sure that the Goyim cut it down, and when they sell it to you, it will be a Shinui Rishus, and once it's Shinui Rishus, you're Kaina, and you can use them. And in Yirtzeh Hashem in the next year, we're going to continue from here.